He kicked in my front door on a Saturday morning and called me a filthy animal in my own living room, and for a second I thought it had to be a sick joke because none of it made sense. A drunk cop with a gun in my brand new house on a quiet street where the biggest argument was over hedge height barking orders like I was a criminal he had chased for years. That was the moment both our lives split into the before and the after. My name is Nia Simone. I make a living studying violence power and the stories dangerous men tell to excuse both. So when that uniform stumbled through my doorway with whiskey on his breath and hate in his eyes, I knew exactly what I was looking at. I had moved into Crestwood Lane less than a week earlier, finally giving myself something quiet. Bay windows, polished hardwood, a little garden. That morning I was in a black silk slip, bare feet warm from the sunlight, holding my coffee and thinking this finally feels like home. Then my front door exploded. No knock, no announcement, just a crash as the door flew off its hinges and slammed into the wall, splinters everywhere. In that jagged frame stood Officer Mark Corbin, late 30s, uniform, rumpled cheeks, flushed eyes, bloodshot, swaying just enough that any honest person would say drunk. He looked me up and down, slow, annoyed that I existed. Well, he slurred. New girl on the block and already running product, huh? Got a tip. This is a dope house. Figures. The smell of bourbon hit me before his words finished. My brain did what it's trained to do. White male, heavy build, armed, impaired, angry, convinced he's the hero. No warrant. Body cam off. Threat level critical. Officer, I said, setting my mug down, hands visible, voice steady. You just forced your way into my home without a warrant or probable cause. You need to leave. Right now. You would have thought I spit in his face. The idea that a black woman in his new favorite zip code said the word illegal back to him, that burned. You don't tell me what's legal, he snapped, stepping deeper into my house. We got an anonymous tip. Drugs distribution, wrong element. I know you're kind. You bring the ghetto with you. There it was. No code, no disguise. He grabbed my arm, fingers digging in like he owned it. That was his mistake. I shifted, trapped his wrist, drove the heel of my hand into the nerve in his forearm clean and fast. His grip died. He stumbled back, shocked. I hadn't folded. That was your warning, I said, moving behind the armchair, my voice flat. Leave my property. He laughed, ugly, pulled a plastic bag from his belt and tossed it onto my glass table. White powder puffed up. There it is, he shouted, now performing for a story he was writing. Product in plain sight. Get on the floor, you filthy animal. His hand dropped toward his gun. Before I chose between disarming him and getting shot in my own house, I heard sirens. Backup. A younger officer, Dave Miller, came through the wrecked doorway. Clear eyes, neat uniform, the look of somebody who still thinks rules matter. He saw the door, saw me, saw the bag, smelled the whiskey. Mark, what is this? He asked. Corbin slid straight into smooth. Tip came in, he said, steady now. Door was ajar, saw the coke, she went crazy, had to use force. Miller hesitated one breath too long, looked at me, at the door, at Corbin. Then he nodded because he knew the unwritten rule, back your partner. They cuffed me. I let them. Not because I felt powerless, but because sometimes letting a bully finish his lie is the quickest way to bury him with it. As we walked past my shattered doorway, I locked eyes with Miller and spoke so clearly the street could hear. For the record, Officer Miller, I am being arrested by an intoxicated Officer Mark Corbin, badge 734, who kicked in my locked door without a warrant and planted that bag from his own pocket. You see it, you smell it. What you do with that is on you. His jaw clenched. He still put me in the car. Silence is its own kind of answer. They sat me in a gray box at the 12th Precinct, fluorescent hum, stale air. 2 detectives came in like they'd seen my kind 100 times. Look, Nia, one said, we've got a veteran officer partner backing him, drugs on your table. Help yourself, tell us who you're working with. I met his eyes. My name is Dr. Nia Simone, I said, steady. I am invoking my right to remain silent and my right to an attorney. And I am stating that Officer Corbin entered my home illegally while intoxicated and planted stolen narcotics. Anything you think you have is fruit of the poisonous tree. The phrase hung in the air. The second detective studied me differently. You a lawyer? He asked. No, I said. I just pay attention. They left less sure than they came. Down the hall, Corbin was with his captain selling his version. Anonymous hotline, suspicious activity, door conveniently ajar, violent suspect. The captain, who liked his stats more than his paperwork on complaints, told him to make sure his report matched Miller's and moved on. On paper, it almost worked. The problem was internal affairs. Lieutenant Frank Holloway pulled the case and the details tasted wrong. Tip with no substance. Safe neighborhood random open door. Big guy claiming a tiny woman assaulted him with no marks. Then he ran my name through the deeper systems and hit a wall restricted refer to DOJ. That flag is not for random civilians. It means someone at a higher level expects you to be left alone. When they finally let me make a call, I didn't dial a defense attorney. I dialed a secure number I knew by heart. One ring, a voice, a code phrase. 30 seconds of calm explanation, unlawful local detention, compromised operative request, immediate federal intervention. I hung up. The sergeant watching me frowned. "Who was that?" he asked. "That," I said, "is why you should probably stop processing my paperwork." Shortly after 4 black Suburbans pulled up in front of the precinct like a scene out of a movie everybody suddenly regretted being in. Men and women in suits came in with purpose, not noise. At the front, Assistant Director Thomas Evans of the FBI flashed his ID. "As of this moment," he announced, "all matters related to the arrest of Naya Simone are under federal jurisdiction. All files, evidence, and personnel involved are subject to federal review. Any interference will be treated as obstruction." The room went silent. They opened my cell, addressed me with actual respect, walked me into the squad room where Corbin had been bragging not long before. Evans checked I was all right, then faced the others. "You arrested her as Naya Simone," he said, lifting a badge identical to his own. "Allow me to reintroduce her as Special Agent in Charge Nia Simone, head of the FBI's Domestic Terrorism Task Force for this region." Yeah, that landed. Corbin looked like somebody had yanked the floor out from under him. All that swagger from my living room evaporated. Suddenly he understood he hadn't just kicked in some random door. He'd kicked up. I led his interrogation with Evans and Holloway sitting in. I laid a tablet on the table and walked him through his morning step-by-step GPS from his patrol car, showing him parked behind a bar, receipts for enough whiskey to tank his credibility terminal logs, proving he created his own anonymous tip, less than 2 minutes before my door came off its hinges. Policy records confirming his body cam's buffer captured him saying, "Get on the floor, you filthy animal," as he forced entry lab reports matching the cocaine he planted to a batch from a previous seizure he'd signed out and never returned. The story he'd built unraveled in front of him. "Here's where we are," I told him quietly. "You abused your badge, your gun, your access to evidence, your authority to write reports, and you tried to put me in a cage to justify your ego and your prejudice. You can take this whole fall yourself, or you can start telling us how long you've been doing this and who let you." The tough guy act didn't last. In another room, agents laid it out for Miller: keep lying and go down with him, or tell the truth and walk with immunity. He talked. About the slurs, the bogus stops, the planted bags. The complaints buried the culture of looking away. He wasn't noble, but he finally stopped being a shield. The trial that followed was fast because the evidence was heavy. The jury heard the audio, saw the data, watched Corbin's own body cam betray him, listened to Miller admit he'd helped cover for him, listened to me recount that morning with every detail backed by documentation. Guilty on deprivation of rights, guilty on perjury, guilty on tampering with evidence, guilty on possession of stolen narcotics, guilty on assault. The judge called him a danger and a disgrace and sent him where he belonged, a number in a federal system instead of a badge on a quiet street. His conviction lit up everything around him. The Department of Justice opened a full investigation into his precinct. Old cases tied to his word got dragged into the light. Some were thrown out. A handful of other officers with the same patterns lost their badges or their freedom. The department was placed under federal oversight, forced into new training, stronger camera rules, a real civilian review board. People who had sat in cells because men like him planted stories finally walked out. Not perfect, but real. I still live on Crestwood Lane. I replaced the door with steel and oak. I still drink my coffee in that bay window. Some mornings I remember his voice, that word animal, hanging in my own hallway, and it hits me all over again. And then I remember the only reason this story ended the way it did is because he picked the wrong house. It should not take a federal title and a secret phone number for a black woman in her own home to be believed. So let me ask you, Was what happened to Mark Corbin true justice or just a rare exception because his victim had power he didn't see? Do you think this kind of abuse is exaggerated? Or do you believe there are still plenty of Corbins out there who just haven't kicked the wrong door yet? Have you lived through or witnessed anything that made you question who the law is really serving? Tell me in the comments, argue your side, share your stories, and if you want more honest stories where people who get written off as victims take their power back, hit like, subscribe, and share this, because the more of us who are watching, the harder it gets for men like him to hide.